Welcome, friends of the National Wrestling Alliance. I'm proud to present Mickie James, who, as many of you know, is partnering with the NWA for the EmPowerrr pay-per-view, August 28th, Chase Ballroom in historic St. Louis. Unbelievable, we're pulling this off. And the next night, we're going to have another pay-per-view, NWA 73. Mickie, I asked you to do this conversation for a variety of reasons. First off, you're free. You're free.
Freedom.
And here's an interesting thing, and you can talk about this as much or as little as you like, but what people don't understand is that Mickie James is a free agent. Our deal here with the NWA is Mickie's coming in to co-promote this event, and we will be co-promoters on this event, but you have not signed a talent deal with the NWA.
I've not.
And that is not a work. That is straight up shoot, because that's what you want. And as her friend, I said, I think that makes sense, because you have all the power, and you should do as you wish and what's best for your family. And because we have a great relationship, obviously you're married to Aldis, NWA World's Heavyweight Champion. You're part of our family anyway. Mm-hmm. You've been pitching in behind the scenes. No secret there. Part of our success is part of your support, so thank you for that. But the key thing is I want to frame this conversation a very particular way. We're here to do a real deep dive, not only in Mickie's career, but this isn't a shoot interview. I want to talk about Mickie's career in the context of what it means for her to now have power. The NWA has now empowered you to put on a pay-per-view in your image, in your dream, really, of what you think you can bring to the table and what you can do to help change not only the perception of women's wrestling throughout the industry, but also in the world. One of the interesting things looking at your career, doing a deep dive in your career the last couple days, is you were literally one of the first people to kind of break that glass ceiling, that a woman could main event, that a woman could be as big a part of the show as the men, because traditionally in wrestling, the men have dominated the industry, even though there's been great female superstars throughout the years.
Absolutely.
But you were part of that generation, and many point to you as the first person that really kind of changed that perception of what female wrestling could be in the 21st century. So let's start there. Let's kind of work backwards. You have the power. We have this incredible event. Why don't you tell everyone your sort of vision for the event and why we got into business together on this?
Well, obviously why we got into business is because I think we've had conversations, we talked about this, and it's no secret that I've been very supportive to the NWA and everything you all have been doing since you've taken over and rebuilt and taken it up to where it's at now, which I'm just so proud of.
Thank you.
It's amazing to see, and I think that in our real conversations, just as friends, I knew that you understood some of my little frustrations, but it's always business and how things go. And I think even talking about it from you, I think you genuinely felt what I was feeling, and so for you to graciously give me the platform and the ability to not only entrust in me, to put faith in me that this is going to be amazing, and I have every intention of it being amazing, but the platform and the ability to just say, no, here's an opportunity to prove you're right, and let's hope that you're right, and I don't think that anyone's really given me that, and it's just ironic, I think, I've known you for 20 years now. It's crazy, all the way from way back when those TNA shows in the Nashville Fair.
Back at the asylum.
Yes. So I've said this recently, it's kind of ironic that even in crossovers and stuff like that it took someone who's been super successful in music and now with building the NWA brand to put their faith in me when I had looked for it for people that I had wanted in the wrestling business for so long. And it's really a full circle kind of ironic moment for me. And I'm really excited about it. It's just, I think to have power is an easy thing to say, but to be able to use that power in a positive way is really, really, amazing. And I really want to be able to give the women a platform, because it's not about me. It's not about just women's wrestling. It's about the validity of our voices need to be heard.
That's the key. That is the absolute key. It takes time for things to adjust. If the goal is we get to a point where something is no longer a big deal, that to announce an all ladies pay-per-view isn't a big deal. Trust me, that's the world that I want to live in. And I think that's the world that you want to live in.
Yes.
But I also think we have to sit here and identify that there's still a little ways to go before we get there. Mm-hmm. And to us, that in our company, this is a first step, sort of not righting a wrong, but sort of creating a new narrative.
Right.
And let's take that journey together and let's see where that goes. I don't see how that's a bad thing. I don't see how that's even worthy of criticism, but you're also in the sort of the center of it. So speak from your perspective on how you view these critiques and these perspectives, because I think it's one thing for me as the male owner of a professional wrestling company to say, well, here's what I think, but tell me what you think about all that.
Well, I think you're
and
right.
By the way, sorry.
No, it's
20
okay.
years in the business, that's the other part of it.
Yeah, 20 years in the business, and also, and I've been very, blessed to have a career, and to have all this time and 15 years of it being on television, But in that time, I've seen it evolve so much. And, if the fact that we're even having this conversation about equality or how that looks like in here in 2021 already says enough. And a lot of these criticisms, which they feel like, when I read them and I go, I understand, and they're trying to validate their point, but they're legitimately just validating mine. Because the fact that we have to celebrate a first time ever female main event just now, or first time ever, two African American women main eventing a space, the fact that that's just being celebrated for a first time ever now that's huge steps for us. But I want to get to a place where you can announce women for a main event and it not be a special thing or a thing to pat ourselves on the back for, but no, it's because it's a marquee match and it belongs at the top of the card.
It's hard to remember when the original idea that has now become NWA EmPowerrr, was first really formed, because obviously Mickie was a part of the WWE's all-women show, and there are well-established, long-running women's independent promotions and things of that nature. So, again, I know that both Billy and Mickie have made this point. It wasn't like they were announcing something that was the sort of reinventing the wheel. I think what the point was they were trying to make was now this is, rather than a token gesture of a show where it's the same guys running the show, everyone, but it's just going to be all girls booked on the card. It's no, a woman is the executive producer, and with all due respect, it's a woman who is there for something other than just her last name. She's there based on merit. She's there based on credibility, and in the final say decision-making capacity. So I think that it was always something that I felt like she had wanted to do. I just think that she had hoped that circumstances would have, presented themselves at other times, and it just lined up in a way where everything fell into place, and it just happened to be with Billy and the NWA, and that all worked out well because of obviously my work with the NWA, and obviously her sort of pseudo involvement with the company, even though it had really just been on an unofficial kind of advisory basis. So to then get to a point where, Billy was the one who just called us one day and just went, let's just do it. Instead of trying to figure out when's the right time, how to do it, let's just do it and we'll figure it out. And to see her energized by that, and to just be in this space now where she's on the phone every day talking to different people. What about this? What about that? The ideas are flowing, the creative juices are flowing, and it's cool to see, because I've been in that place with the NWA for 4 years now. So to now get to see her plug into that energy source too, as opposed to, and again, I don't want to make this a bashing WWE thing, because they're a totally different enterprise. You're talking about a company, that's been around for decades, has been a market leader for decades, billions of dollars of funding, and a huge amount of responsibilities in terms of their market cap and all these other things that we don't have to concern ourselves with. So what's so cool about watching her involved in this environment now is just getting to realize, every day I see this sort of realization in her, oh, there's no red tape. There's no restrictions to this. If I want to do that, I can just say, I want to do that. And the chances are, unless it's something unless there's some major issue with it, Billy's probably going to go, yeah, cool. Okay, let's do that. And you can just see that that sort of fog lifting. I've seen it with the talent. I've seen it with guys that have come in for others, you know, for us in the NWA, just on a talent level, where they've just sort of gone, oh, I've kind of felt like doing this. And I've just looked at them and been like, okay, so do that then. They go, wait, but that's it? Who do I have to talk to? No one. You know, I go, everyone here trusts you, you know.
Explain from your perspective as a 20-year veteran in this business about how it's important to have different voices in those sessions, in the structure of how the stories get told.
Right.
How does that work from your standpoint? Both what would be the successful version of it so that it works through properly in terms of balancing all business concerns, but then as a talent, when you're receiving stuff that you're thinking, whoever's writing this doesn't really understand my experience and the experience of a lot of my compatriots.
Well, for one, it's been mostly men making all the decisions and writing television for women and what they think that would create drama between women. And I just think that
sorry, because I think it's because I'm not sort of trying to be the devil's advocate, but I'm sort of curious. One of the arguments is because it's oftentimes men writing for a male audience.
Right.
So how would you kind of counter that? Like how do you it's not a criticism as much as what's your perspective on that?
I think that's the main reason why we've lost a lot of our female audience in the first place is because we've written it in a catty kind of super sexy way where it's not really something that you would want your daughter to watch and aspire to be. And now we've grown into a space where there are little girls that want to be champions. And that wasn't a space before when we were doing bra and panty matches and stuff like that. So I think that we've come so far, but it's just, it's taken a while to get here, and the wrestling business has always been a little late to the party. I say that, and it's taken us so long to evolve to this space now. But if someone argues to me, well, if I was to put on an all-male product, or that would kind of seem, that would get like negativity, and I go, well, when I look at television, for the longest time, it was an all-male product. Females were a novelty act, and there certainly have been shows designed with only the male talent, participating and being involved in that. So I think that we're in a space, I know that there's a market for it for women's wrestling, and I think that there's so much talent out there now, whereas before there was only a handful of really, really great female talent that could be seen in that perspective. Now there's so much out there, and it's just a space where it's taken us a while to get there, and I think we're in a real cool space because we're not doing it for the first time ever, but I would ask that, why hasn't it been done again? Because isn't it because the fans didn't want it because they've been begging for it? So then why hasn't it been done? So
is your perspective that in order to attract this wider audience, which is traditionally, at least in the last few years, not been watching wrestling on television, that we need to bring these other voices in to sort of speak with a bigger voice?
Absolutely. Well, in a space that can be, like, they can understand, and speak to them on a real level, and with real female drama and stuff that we go through as mothers, as entertainers, as athletes, as humans, and I think that men, not all men, and I don't mean that in a way, but a lot of men that are writing for these females are out of touch with what is reality in 2021 for a female, especially in this business, because, before it was like, oh, toughen up and have thick skin, and you're one female in a locker room of 20 men. Now there's a little bit more equality in that, in the sense of there will be 4 or 5 female talents back there, really good,
Yeah.
And you need someone that's going to be able to understand them and speak to them and get that, get the best out of them. And I don't think that it's always, for me, in my experience, obviously, there would be times when I would argue that point to, like, whether it was a backstage or something, and I would argue that with whoever my writer is. And because he's not a female, he couldn't understand why I was saying, like, that doesn't really work. It doesn't make sense. I would never really say it like that because that's not how women think.
In essence, not authentic even to the character.
Right. Not just to the character, but as a woman as well, and yeah.
I know how hard professional wrestlers work on their physique, on their in-ring ability. What does that feel like when you're tired, you've been on the road, you got to get up at 7 a.m. to hit the gym before you got to travel? What's that feel like, knowing before you even go into the gym, no matter how hard you work, no matter what you put into it, you can only go so high?
Right.
That's got to feel really hard. How do you navigate that?
I don't, well, yeah. That's an interesting question. I guess it's never really been put to me before, so I've never really thought it from that perspective. I think when I loved wrestling so much, and I was so passionate about it, and I felt that we could, and I was hoping that it would happen in my career span, that we could get to a point that would all change. Like to know that you will never be more than like a popcorn match, or like never even like semi-main event or anything like that, but you're always going to be considered a novelty match. You're going to go to promotions and get thrown absolute bullshit and go like, here's your lingerie pillow fight for the evening. And you're just like, but I've trained 7 years to become one of the best. Like that was my goal. And I got a water gun fight tonight. And, stuff like that.
And because I know this, because I was around a lot of these times that you're talking about, not only were you being recognized in the greater fandom as being very skilled at your job, but the male men that I knew in the business couldn't put you over more at how good you were. So that's even weirder, because it's not like the other side of the locker room was like, oh, we don't care. Like you were being recognized.
No, it was never from the locker room space. I think I've always had the love. It's interesting because I've always had the love of the locker room and the boy, because I was always one of the boys, because I trained with all guys. There wasn't a lot of women training. So, we all have we're family backstage. We really are. And I think that I've always had the love and the respect of the locker room, of the boys, and they've always seen that and always applauded myself and other women who are just as good, better, however you want to look at it, for being that. It's not that mentality. It's more of like higher and higher you go. Like
but that's why this is important. Again, this is the point I'm trying to make. Putting you in a position to make some of these decisions is the thing.
It is the next step to get to the end goal. And I'm grateful that you gave me that opportunity, and that you're teaming with me to do this, because I feel like we're in a really cool space to do something. Is it not groundbreaking? But it kind of is groundbreaking for us, in a sense of I am the first female to head up something like this, and that's a really
I honestly, if there is one, at least in the American scene, there may be, but I don't know it.
Yeah, I don't know that,
and certainly not at this level that I know of.
No, so thank you for that.
Well, but this is the thing. This is why it's important. It's not like you're just being handed something because you're a beautiful woman or you've had a good career. You have earned the respect of this business, like from the bottom up. You literally came from the bottom all the way. No one did you any favors. Not that I've ever seen.
I had to do the hard way, the grassroots way, which I appreciate in the long run. I do appreciate, but I think sometimes people forget that as well along the way.
Because you've accomplished so much. That's what's crazy about it.
Yeah.
Sometimes people even forget that about me. They think I was born with some kind of silver spoon. It's like
no.
I think we came from very similar backgrounds. Like everything we've ever earned, we've had to earn ourselves.
Scratched and clawed.
So that creates a different vibe, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's why we can kind of work together as partners. It's like we know how hard this is.
Yeah. Well, I think because it makes us pretty humble, and I think that in a sense too. So we're not like angrily going in there throwing our gavels down because we've had to work so hard. It just fuels us more to go like, okay, I'm just going to prove you wrong then.
When you look at women who have had incredible runs in the business, and you have women who have built a very large fan base and have been celebrated for their accolades and their accomplishments, certainly the majority of them are WWE, and that's understandable. I think that what Mickie represents is something slightly different, in the sense that she made it to WWE kind of despite not necessarily being what they had in mind. And we've always felt that some of her more disappointing periods at WWE were kind of as a result of the fact that she was never really supposed to be there in the first place. Like, she wasn't, again, what these guys' vision of a female star was meant to be. Add to that the fact that she broke in the same way that I broke in, the same way that all the men in the business break in, pretty much, which is like rough and tumble, independence, drive your car into the ground until you can't drive it anymore. you know, hope that the promoter has enough money to pay you at the end of the night. And if not, figure out a way that you're going to get that money no matter what happens. Hope that you're working with someone half decent, and then hustle to get your next bookings and keep making a name for yourself, and hope that you can build up enough market value where you can then make a full-time living at this and not have to, you know, humiliate yourself in front of 25 drunks in an armory somewhere. That's the real. A lot of the women in the business didn't go through that. A lot of them were plucked out of obscurity based on their looks, which is, look, it is what it is. I'm not hating on any of those girls that got it like that, because they didn't choose it. You know, it's just the way it happened. But that's not the way it happened for her. Like, she had to earn every single level up that she had in the business, like from sort of nothing independence to decent independence, from decent independence to, oh, this girl's got a bit of an independent reputation. You know, she's kind of known as one of the best indie girls now. To TNA, to Ring of Honor, to WWE, you know what I mean? And it's, so what she represents is the true grit of a professional wrestler.
I felt like, you know, a lot of the things that I would fight for would fall on deaf ears, and if you've seen the business evolve, we go through ebbs and flows. Like, I felt like there was a real surgence of women's wrestling when you'd see like Trish and Lita main event in Raw, and they were having killer matches, Jazz and Ivory, and, you know, I was a Sensational Sherry fan too. It's the best of all time, in my opinion. I'm biased or not biased, depending on who you are, but
I'd put her up there.
yeah. So that was always what I wanted and gravitated to, but then we'd have to go backwards, and that was one of my arguments when you said divas and stuff. I always kind of go like, huh. I did win the championship. Always grateful for all my accolades and for the work that I've done, but
9, right?
Always, huh?
It's 9.
9 time.
But
at the same
never
time,
NWA
never.
Women's World Champion.
Kamille. Not yet. I don't know. Ooh, she's a tough one. I think I could take her if I kicked her in the kneecap. Anyway, I digress. But I'm saying it's just one of those things of like, you have to go through all these ebbs and flows. So as much as like achievements as we would start to happen, then we would have something that would kind of set us back.
But what do you think were the setbacks? Do you think that was a cultural convulsion, meaning like there was kickback from the audience, the ratings didn't happen? Like, what was your perspective at the time? Why you felt like things would get to a point and then stall?
Well, and that's an interesting point, because I feel like some of those decisions came from a place that I didn't understand. You know, I'm looking at it from the wrestler's perspective, passionate about the business. I want to be the best in the world, not just the best female wrestler, but one of the best of all time, period. And so when I feel like, oh, that's getting pulled, now I'm not looked at as an equal. Now I can't be Mickie James, a household name. I'm a diva, which now it's like, so it's 2 or 3 hurdles to get to make sure that my name gets out there. And is that a selfish place? Maybe, but the business is a selfish place.
What athlete doesn't want to be the best?
No doubt, right?
I want to be the best musician.
No doubt.
That makes total sense to me.
Right.
Like, why be in the business if you're not going to go for the top?
The top. And if nothing else, at least your very best, right? Like, but
yes.
That's still not good enough. The best is the best, and that's just
Well, those are 2 different conversations.
Yes.
But I don't want to cut you off. But
no, but then you go like back steps. We do back steps. So we would come forward 2 or 3 steps, and then we would take 2 or 3 steps back. And so it was this constant roller coaster. And I think not until, you know, there was just like women getting 2-minute matches, and it was just constant, like, you know, not very good women's wrestling. And it wasn't always due to the females that were in the match. It was due to the booking side of it, that the fans really started to go like, no, this is not okay. Like, no, we don't look at these women like you apparently look at these women. Like, we...
So you saw that. You saw the culture basically responding negatively
to what was being presented, and I think that in turn the business had to change. But I don't know that it always, like, there was small things that have changed and been implemented through. It's slowly to get to where we are now. But even from that movement to now, that's still a big space, you know.
Right.
So my perception changed of women's wrestling. I grew up watching the Attitude Era, so there were a lot of like the pillow fights and the brawl fights and stuff like that. But then I remember watching Lita. And Lita doing the backflips, and even with her thong hanging out and doing the back, you know, that to me was the definition of I'm a woman, I'm sexy, but look what I'm doing. I am a badass. And that's what I truly remember. And then kind of moving on, I feel like NXT really did a really good job of creating a women's division and lifting up the women's division to be more athletes and have more athletic style matches. And that's when I kind of remember it changing and women really getting a fair and equal opportunity.
Along that timeline, you won your first championship 2005. Am I right about that? Okay. I knew it was
2006, right? April 2006.
somewhere around there.
That's WrestleMania.
It's a couple of years ago.
A couple years ago.
A couple years ago. So if that's because obviously winning a championship, you know, from an office standpoint, from a booking standpoint, that is the company saying you are the face of our company. We
Right.
have all our faith in you.
Yes.
Did you feel when you were champion, and basically you've been champion wherever you've worked, did you feel that faith translated anything? Did you have any more power, or it was just a variation on
No.
the theme?
I didn't feel like I had any power. And I think it's very different now than it was even then. I felt that they were putting the faith and the trust in me, and I felt like due to me being over-prepared, and that's a word that, you know, I learned in OVW, that I was so over-prepared because I was in the beginning of that diva era kind of stuff and all this, and I was so frustrated. You know, I was so frustrated even when I was in developmental because I'm like, I worked my whole life to be a wrestler, and now I'm getting overlooked because they want to do this new thing where they don't highlight women's wrestling. It's just about bra and panties again, and I thought we were past that, and I get that wrestling's entertainment, but then evolve. So I was just so happy to be there. I was so grateful to finally, like, when I talk about that moment, it's still one of my greatest matches, greatest moments of all time, because that match was one of the most talked about matches of that card. Whether, you know,
This
which
is
is
Trish.
celebrated, yes, which is amazing, and it's to be celebrated. But I don't know that it was celebrated with open arms by everybody, because I don't think that everybody appreciated that the women's match was the most talked about match. And then I thought, in my heart of hearts, like when we did the all women's pay-per-view, the Evolution, I was like, oh, this is it. Like, this is going to be the space where this is going to come off really great, and then as a whole, everyone will go like, no, this is something that we need moving forward.
It felt that way from an outside perspective.
But then coming out of that, I go, and all the attempts, and it wasn't just, I know I'm not alone when I say this, of doing another pay-per-view, of perhaps, you know, a 30-minute show. And we can say all the things we want, but I just know that there was all the tools, all the resources, all the talent, all the legends. There was it would have literally just taken a click of a button to make it happen in a real space, and it was just never done. But yet there were other shows that were done that were in that same vein. Like, it was never going to, I don't think anyone had this like unrealistic, in this moment in time, where it would compete with like a primetime show.
Right.
You know, it would more live in its own space, but it'd be a beautiful space to help build and create talent and get them experience. Because one thing that a lot of talent, especially right now in these times, is not getting is experience in front of people and on television. And that's where you learn the most. And that's where you really grow and develop as a character, as a performer, and know how to. And you have to have people that have been there and made money on television to be able to help you learn how to make money on television. Like, you can't build today's stars without yesterday's stars helping guide them, because
Right.
there's an art to this business, as you know, and it's just, yeah. So
Yeah, it's confusing to me, and it's not because what you're saying is confusing. It's confusing to me because from an outside perspective, and I did see that first all-women's pay-per-view as a sort of a moment in time, which is why some of the criticism that you and I have received in doing this is like, well, what's the difference?
Right.
I didn't really take it as criticisms. I go back to what you said. I kind of took it as kind of proving her point.
Right.
If you have to point to something to make a point, then why are you making the point? It doesn't make sense. I don't
Right.
know.
No. Total.
In essence, I don't think we'd be doing this if we thought the point was already made.
Right.
Who wants to make a point that's already been made?
Exactly.
And again, it's not just an all-female pay-per-view. Everything we've talked about is like that's not what we're after. We're after a different scenario where different voices can come to the fore and illuminate a different path forward. And I, particularly, having been in the entertainment business for 30 years, I look and say, why isn't there more energy in this direction?
Right.
It makes total sense to me. If we look at the UFC as a model of successful promotion, they now have a model where you don't even blink if
Right.
it's a female main event or an all-male main event. You don't even blink.
It's not even a
as
question
long as the
of-
talent is credible, it's right.
Right.
So I can say without a doubt, as somebody in the professional wrestling business, we have not reached that point in the professional wrestling business as a whole.
Right.
And we certainly can point to recent successes, and I applaud them. I mean, that's what we want.
That is what
That's
we
why I
want.
say it's not one company, one person, one moment. It's a system-wide thing. But I do feel, and I don't want to speak for you, so please, but I would like to think that we feel that there's still more work to be done, and there's nothing bad about going to work on
Right.
the thing.
Exactly.
And nothing wrong with celebrating, hey, this is a pretty cool thing.
Right.
It's not chest beating, you know, and it's
No.
not like we're so great. It's a, this feels like it needs more energy. Let's put more energy here and see if what we feel in our hearts is there to be had.
True. It's true.
Okay.
1,000, I'm yes with you. And I feel like the fact that we have to celebrate a first time ever or like those things, like you
Particularly
said.
for this company.
Right. I would love to, like you said, get to a space where we don't blink in wrestling when you have two women at the top as a headline, like where it's not like a celebratory thing. Hey, look how great we are. Look at our main event, but more at, hey, this is the main event. You know, that when we get there, then that's when we're at a more like
nothing-
true equal platform.
Nothing would make me happier, and we're pretty much already there, where we can literally go back and forth on our pay-per-views to the male world championship and the female world championship, and literally not even blink an eye.
Right.
I would love that in terms of equity, in terms of fan interest, in terms of everything. We
Yeah.
certainly have the talent to do that with Kamille and Nick Aldis, your husband, as world champions. So proud to represent that. But building out this deeper thing, and I think we should speak on this, because I have spoken on this in some interviews. We need to inspire that younger generation
Right.
to want to get in the business, to believe that they will have an opportunity that will not be impeded by anything else other than their own ability
Yeah. You're so
or
right.
lack thereof.
And that's why I think that question was so interesting to me, because I go like, wow, I guess I did think about that in those moments, but I always have used everything to fuel me. Like for every no, I was like, I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to prove them wrong. Like that was like what fueled me in that hungry Mickie James. Like as you get older or you feel like you earn that respect as you have it, those no's make you a little more angrier because you go like, I feel like I shouldn't have to argue this with you because I feel like I have a track record and you should know that I'm not like out going into business for myself.
Without
from
being personal, and you can generalize because I
Yeah.
think it's more what we're after. When you're in those conversations, and you've been in hundreds of those conversations, did you feel generally that the conversations were rooted in a kind of a latent sexism or a lack of belief that women belonged at the top of the card or could draw? Or did you feel it was more just because they didn't understand you or your perspective?
I think that was a multitude of things. I don't think it was always one thing. Like, some of it was like, I felt like sometimes like, oh, of course the girls want to do something. You know what I mean? Like there was always that, because everyone's different in where they are with whether it's how they were raised or what their beliefs or where they feel like. I mean, it's an ever-evolving business, and we still have a lot of the same people making the decisions. So they just haven't caught up. Some of them, you know, and that sense. But then there's other of it is just like, oh, Mickey's like, she's, you know, whether it was a personal thing, maybe they just didn't like me as a person, but I felt like I always, for every fight, it was for a valid reason, and it wasn't just for my own best interest. I think that's the difference. You know, the business itself is such a self-serving thing, and so a lot of times when a talent will go to the agent or whoever it is, they'll automatically be on the defense because they think that they're trying to do something that's only
Right, but
going to benefit
when you really
themselves.
got-
But when I'm sitting here going like, no, this is not about me. It's about the women or about us as a whole. You know, I think.
But do you think that's a vestige of a leftover culture, or is it a lack of belief that there's a business there? You know what I'm saying?
Right. I think it's both.
I'm just asking for a general. If you put all your experiences in the hopper and you kind of came to one conclusion, what do you think has been the prohibitive factor?
I think some, like, a little bit of outdated thoughts and probably perhaps the business end on it. And my argument would be like, well, have we ever actually, you know, but until now, we're doing it now, taking more than a month to promote a show as more than just a first time ever novelty kind of thing.
Right. So one of the points I've been making in some interviews that I've done is people point to the NBA and the WNBA as sort of a kind of a wonky model, and that the WNBA hasn't drawn money as well and has been a loss leader. And the point I make is it's important to the wider audience to demonstrate that you are concerned about everybody at the table, and B, you have to create a generation and a generation and a generation after who actually want to aspire to a professional level. If you don't
Right.
do that, well, you're basically saying, well, there never will be a WNBA. And in essence, there never will be a WNBA that can compete at the highest level with the NBA. But why wouldn't they want that? Why wouldn't a global brand that's worth $1 bazillion want to see if they can find that other thing? It's a very weird criticism, and I've actually seen where people have looped that criticism in with us.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because I look at that argument and I go, well, first off, there's not even close to the amount of money going into the WNBA to even promote it as an equal to the NBA. You know, like the women aren't getting paid a fraction of what the men are getting paid. Their facilities are not even...
Let me stop you there, because this is a criticism worth addressing. People oftentimes say, well, the reason that there's a pay disparity is because of X, Y, Z, or the draw.
Right.
What do you say to that from a talent perspective?
Well, probably because, you know, it's still a new, like it's evolving thing. And so there's more women now going out for the WNBA than ever was before. However, it's taken how long to get there, you know?
About 20 years, right?
Yeah. And the fact that, you know, you see like these shots of their locker rooms or their training facilities right beside when you're seeing live footage and television from the men's training facilities, it's night and day. And I get that we have to get to a space to women's, or that there is drawing in that much money in order to perhaps celebrate. But in my mind, I go like, well, how can you get there if you're already telling the people out of the gate that you as a corporation don't see them as equals? And until you can sit there and promote them and see them as equals, the people in turn are, even though, except for the hardcore fans, the people that want it and that are in with the change. And that's what it is. It's all about change. You know, until those people can get to a space where there's enough people listening, you know, that's really what it's about. And so I still think that, you know, the biggest, it's taken so long for the WNBA to get there, and it'll take us long. It's taken this long for us to get there, right? But the difference is like, I don't feel that even the WNBA has ever been promoted as big of a deal as the NBA.
I feel like women have always had the ability to be on top, to perform, to show what they got. They've always had it inside, but they haven't always had the chance to show it. And before, I think a lot of women had to kind of bite the bullet when it came to being the sex objects and just looking good and standing there. And if that's how they wanted to make it because they were passionate about wrestling, well, that's what they had to do. And so now that that's kind of changed, and we can still be sexy, we can still be, you know, women with all of this, but we're also showing that we're something else as well. We're athletes, we're powerful, and we can do our own thing.
Talk to me, because it's a sensitive thing, and I'm not trying to, again, be personal, but talk to me about where you've had who you are, what you are, and what you look like sort of used in an equation, what you felt was kind of like over a particular line. The most famous, of course, is where your weight or your physicality was brought into an angle. Mm-hmm. We could talk about that as much as you want or not at all. I just address
That's
it from the standpoint of is explain a little bit, because I'm very interested in this. It's certainly an optics business. I'm under that microscope. You're under that microscope. Mm-hmm. Being attractive, if I can be called attractive, is part of our world. But the point being is that when you're put in a position where you know there's a glass ceiling, mm-hmm. you know you're bringing something different to the table, and it becomes about something other than your ability.
Right.
Where for you is the line between, yes, I'm a personality on television, yes, who I am is sort of, that's open for criticism because that's part of the business I'm in, and yet this is too far, this is over the line, because now in a way you're attacking me because of I'm something I can't change about myself.
Right.
Does that make sense? It's
Yeah.
a very sensitive line, and I think it
is.
moves almost by the day these days, mm-hmm. but I think it's important to talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, it is important to talk about it, actually, because, and I'm okay with talking about everything, because I think it goes back to even when I first started. It's a cosmetic business, and most of your career will be based off of someone else's opinion of you, and that's just the reality. And so, you know, even from, you know, girls, you're never going to make it out of Montpelier, Virginia, and I don't know what you're going for trying to be a wrestler, to, you know, being one of the best girls at the independent scene. But what did that really mean? Because I wasn't signed anywhere to...
Yeah, there were times where you were considered one of the best wrestlers in the world and nobody would sign you.
Right. Yeah, and it was just because, oh, she's a wrestler and now we're not looking for that, or we're not looking for, you know. And I remember a moment when I was in, developmental in OVW, and I was told I need you to lose your country accent. It makes you sound ignorant. And I would just go, what? That was the first time anybody had said that to me. In a sense, I didn't know. First off, I didn't realize my accent was that thick. I had to learn how to speak without it. It comes
still
out.
there, though.
It comes out with the more passionate, angry, or if I've been drinking. Those are when they usually feel, or if I'm around my family.
I think I've met her a few times.
You met her. She's a different person sometimes. But yeah, and so I had to learn how to speak without it because I was like, oh gosh, I don't want them to think I'm ignorant. But then think about that statement in itself. Like the fact that that statement was even said to me shows how ignorant that person saying that was in their mind about, because I go like, but some of the top talent champions have had really Southern accents, and been top draws.
So in your mind, was it because they were picking on you because you were a female? Or,
no.
I'm not trying to make it about that. I'm just trying to understand sort of because if we're empowering you in this situation to change things, explain to us what the difference actually is.
I think it was because they looked at female wrestling and they go like, they need to be this.
There. That's what I was trying to get at.
That's what they need to be. Can you fit
So how did
in
you
this
break
box?
out? How did Mickie James break out of that box?
So I lost my Southern accent and I just kept working to be the best wrestler. So because I felt like as soon as I was given the opportunity, in my heart, I did believe this. I knew I was working like twice as hard than a lot of girls to get that opportunity. But in that moment, I knew that once I got that opportunity, I was going to be unstoppable. Because I was going to be over-prepared at that moment. And I wasn't going to get the ball too early where I didn't know what I was doing or be overexposed on television before I was ready. I was going to do all the things, and it's all business. And so you're playing ball. And so I was like, okay, I'll lose my Southern accent. And it took me a while to figure out how to talk. And I took vocal classes and acting classes and stuff like that while I was in developmental and paid for them myself to learn how to speak without my accent. But then you go fast forward and through life and life changes. And I think this is sometimes when, obviously, the business isn't meant to be personal. But as a woman, and maybe this is, for me, I'm just a passionate person, so I'm a feeler. And so even though my personal life would never translate to television and you would never know, sometimes we still are human and we have real issues going on. And so prior to the Piggy James angle, whatever, I also had a lot of personal stuff going on that was really, really affecting me. And I think that it was just too much. It was all too much for me. And it suffered. But to have a Piggy James angle thrown on you and I was probably 138 pounds.
I knew you at that time.
140 top, like it was
You probably
not.
wouldn't remember because I know it's the same for me. When you're on tour a lot, it's a blur. But I remember talking to you at that time, and I remember standing in front of you, and I remember watching it on television, and I'm standing in front of you a week later, and you couldn't have been thinner.
Right.
I mean, you could have been thinner, but you were in total shape. So it was bizarro. It's like how is this woman working something on television which has to do with her weight when she's not even remotely overweight compared to the general population? Right.
And it was really, I was like, and obviously the business can play with your head a lot, right? Like, so I took it very personal in the sense of like...
in that situation, did you feel you were being attacked personally?
I think if somebody thought I was fat and they thought it was funny. They thought that I had gained a few pounds. They had no idea what was going on with me personally. They thought they had an idea of something else that was that whatever it was. And it was let's humble her. Let's kind of devalue her a little bit and then let's cut her loose because she thinks she's too highly of herself or whatever the case may be. I think it was one of those things and that will never be said. But that was personally, I felt like it was a humbling moment. Let's humble her down a little bit. Because the fans love her too much. So let's let the fans make fun of her and start to hate her a little bit. So that way, I feel like it's a lot of, because these are all things that are done and I genuinely hated the idea and I tried to speak that and I go like, I don't think that this is even going, yes, it's a chance to help with cyberbullying and shine a light on it, but is there going to be a payoff? What's the payoff? Because if there's zero payoff, then it's all for nothing. And now you've just made fun of me for no reason. But it is also a cool space to really get Michelle and Layla over and in a space where people actually care about them and they see them as a valid team. And out of that, that's the one thing I will say. It did a couple things. I've had people come to me, and I didn't see it at the moment, but I've had women come to me and men come to me and go like, that thing resonated with me. That's what really resonated with me the most as a wrestling fan, because I was that person in school, or I was that, so it really helped me, your strength through all that.
Okay, so let's play devil's advocate. You and I are in our booking meeting, and we have the power to make these decisions, and somebody comes up with an idea to do something very similar with one of our female talents. What would be the difference for you in that situation?
I don't think it's funny. I don't think it's entertainment.
But this is why it's important to have different voices at the table.
Right.
To say that's not entertaining, or that's not a good idea, or you shouldn't put that talent in that position.
Right.
Right.
Unless that talent specifically came to me and said, I want to do this.
Right.
Which I can't foresee a talent. I just don't think it's not cool to pick on things that either one, someone can't change about themselves, or that's just part of who they are. Like if they are happy, and I know we're in a different space, because you go back to wrestling 20 years ago, that would have definitely been a topic where it would have been poked fun at, and it would have been a promos, it would have been all these things. But there's a lot of things that we did 20 years ago in promos and stuff that that is not acceptable today, because people's perceptions have changed.
And most of them needed to go, so
exactly.
I don't have a particular problem with it.
Yeah.
It's understanding how to evolve what is essentially a heat business.
Yeah.
Where, because I've said this in meetings, and this is where it gets difficult sometimes, is why wouldn't a heel say the meanest thing?
Right.
But we also live in a different world, particularly where it pertains to talent and social media. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because 15 years ago, I was making an argument that talent should literally still be living their character online.
Right.
That was just my perspective 15 years ago. Now it's totally impossible.
It is.
You go on your social media accounts or any number of NWA talents, and you see that they have lives that are rich and varied, and they're different people. They're playing,
right.
and it's the same for actors, and it's the same for hockey players. You know what I mean? I think we've all evolved as a culture. Mm-hmm. So I think the idea of holding people to sort of like quasi different standards is silly, and I feel like my perspective 15 years ago is completely passé. So I think you do need to take into account in this world that we live in very carefully what you're going to ask somebody to do and what you're going to ask them to live with outside the realms of the programming.
Right, because it can deeply affect them, because it's, our characters run very much in line because we work so hard at this. It is a business at the end of the day. And you'd think that we would have evolved since then, but then I look at the most recent thing of like, when I say ageism, and I'll get a lot of flack back from this, but when I say that...
Stop there for a second. Explain to me, because I think it's important to define a term, because not everybody knows what that means.
Right.
I think I know what you mean, but maybe I don't. So define the term before you explain what the issue is.
To be treated differently, and I say this from a female's perspective, because I do think the bracket for men and the bracket for women in this business are very different. But for me, to be treated differently, to be offered lesser roles, to be asked to step down or step aside, all these things. If you were to actually
okay, so I understand. Not due to your ability, but due to your age.
Not due to your ability or your achievements, but due to to be more decorated and to do all of these things, but then to have those successes constantly downplayed to fit a certain narrative or whatever to make way. If you look the word up, I mean, I can look and I can pretty much check every box along the way. And I don't sit there and wave that flag like, oh, this is my stance, because I just want to change that stance, right? Like, that's where we start. But to be offered a walker and depends on television, when I'm going like, you guys, this is not funny. Mm-hmm. Like, this is not, and this is not funny. The people aren't going to like this. You're going to get flack back because it's not entertainment. And it's not good heat. It's the wrong type of heat. That's the difference. I think we've gotten out of touch of like, what's the proper type of heat these days as well. Like, this isn't going to do what you think it's going to do. It's actually going to go take us back a little bit. And when I'd say that, I go, I don't think it's entertaining and I don't think it's funny, especially being that I'm still younger than 70% of your male roster over there. Most of your champions are all 5 years older than me. So why is it different for me because I'm a female? I get that I'm a legend. I get that I'm a decorated champion. I get that all these things and that I'm mentoring someone or whatever the case may be. But that should be a celebrated thing. Because if I was a male, that would be celebrated, would it not? And I think, when I say this, I don't think this is the wrestling business as a whole. I think that it's highlighted there, right? Because this is the industry that we are in. But I know that this is an issue in other industries as well.
Yes.
Women are, once they get married and have babies, then they just work from home, or they shouldn't be CEOs or whatever. But we've broken down all those barriers. They are CEOs. They are, J-Lo is the hottest woman in the whole world.
Some of the highest earning entertainers in the world right now are female. I don't understand why wrestling is behind that curve. Again, hopefully we're part of the change in that.
I hope so,
Let me ask you one more personal question before we kind of finish up here on the pay-per-view. August 28th, 29th, on pay-per-view. Do you feel at any point along the way that being a mother has held you back from your opportunities? Not because of the time that you need to take care of your son, your beautiful son Donovan, who beat me at video games, and I'm still reeling from this devastating loss.
He's been celebrating.
Yes, I'm sure he has. I always say he takes after his father in the promo department. In the
brag department.
Yeah, exactly. But do you feel that being a mother, including being out for a while from the business, in obviously having a child, do you feel that has negatively affected your opportunity?
Yes and no. And I'll say this with this, because obviously as a parent, your first priority is your child. And so I think that there was a lot of times there would be things that I would want to fight on, and I would pick my battles, and because I'm trying to still play business and do, where if I would have passionately thrown a bit more of a fit about, I'm still a professional. You know me well enough to know that I'm not going to be, but there's things that I would have fought a lot harder on, but I also have the security and my son to raise, and I want to make sure that I provide the best life for him. So I put up with a little bit more things that I would argue my point about, but I wouldn't go to war over.
But this is an interesting thing that you raised in my mind. Do you feel the business as a whole has really adjusted to the fact that, especially someone in your position who's going to have a long career in the business, both in and out of the ring, that the business has adjusted like other businesses have had to the fact that women are going to have time out to have children, and that being a mother is a critical part to them being engaged in the business side? Do you think the business is behind there, or you think that the business is where it needs to be?
I feel like it's been more open than ever, and that's a beautiful thing to see. I feel like they've been more open than ever because so many women are now, whereas before, once they had a child or whatever, they were gone. Now there's been so many cases of women becoming mothers.
That's great to hear.
Coming back, are pregnant right now from home, and probably going to come back and have an amazing career after they have the baby. Like, there's been so much, and we're so much more welcome to that. And I think that's a locker room thing too, because before it would never be a thing of like, hey, bring your kid to work day. Like, that was never a thing. Whereas we've evolved to a space where the children are it is a family environment, and that we do protect and we look out for each other's kids and stuff like that while the other one's performing. And, so I just think that it's just become a very, we've always been a family-oriented business in that.
What are you looking for in putting together this card for the EmPowerrr event? I know you said you want the best of the best, but tell me what you want to see that night. Not just talent in the ring. What is it you want people to feel, and what is it that you want them to understand about what you're trying to put together?
I think that what I really, really hope is to, align, because I think that it's not just myself that wants this, and it's not just one locker room that wants this.
Because you're hearing that from the people you're talking to.
I'm hearing that from the people. I think it is the something that we've all wanted, across companies, across the world. I think we've all wanted to be in a space like this for a very long time, and I think that there has been an outcry for it for a long time, and a lot of times it's gone on deaf ears, or it's been treated as a novelty still. But I think that I would hope that there's a real coming together just to celebrate what we're capable of, and women's wrestling as a whole, and the history of the women that it's taken to get to this space.
Going back to Mildred and Moolah and the whole thing.
No doubt. And then, to really change the girls' perceptions of those little Alexis Laries that were running, that can truly see the possibilities for herself, and it isn't just constant glass ceiling after glass ceiling after glass ceiling.
Isn't it incredible that you've done this?
Yeah. But we've done this.
Yes,
we've all done this.
but
like
it's-
all the girls.
But see, I have the advantage of knowing you through the whole thing. I met Alexis Laree. You know, the first time I ever shook your hand was backstage at the Asylum. We had a conversation, and you seemed surprised I knew who you were.
I was shocked.
Right. You were like, well, you did one of these, like, what?
Oh, he's talking to me. Oh, God.
I think it's incredible. I think it's incredible that you have put yourself in this position where you have this level of credibility. As you know, wrestling fans are the hardest people to please, and when they take you in their heart, they will support you till the end.
Yeah.
And I think the support we've seen so far is because you've earned that credibility with them. I'm proud to stand next to you on it. So just to finish, what are people going to see what do you want them to see, or what do you want them to feel? Like when it's all done and the final bell rings, what does that night look like in your mind?
I just wanted to, oh gosh, that's a good question. I couldn't have gotten to this place without the fans. When you say that, it's just like I do have some of the best fans, and I've earned their respect, and the fact that they still stick by me is pretty amazing, and I'm so grateful for that. And they've been my number one supporters even in all of this. I would hope that at coming out of this, like it would be a true celebration of women's wrestling, and just that, just that validation that women's wrestling does matter. And it's more like we've gotten to a different space and time to where it's not just like women's wrestling matters to the sense of let's give them a token match or a token spot or a little hoorah thing. No, like women's wrestling really matters to the people as a whole. We want this and to move forward and to stay current with what is and where we are as a culture that we deserve at this point, by now, we deserve a platform to even showcase that, and where we go from there. And I just want everybody, to shine. I want to have some of the greatest women's matches that you've ever seen. I want to, have some of the greatest women's talent you've ever seen. I have a lot of wants, but the ultimate want is to send people home going like, you damn right.
There are a lot of women in the industry who now have a platform that they would not have had it not been for the groundwork laid by women like Mickie. She would never sit here and say that it was solely her, and I won't go as far as to say that either, but I do think she's the front runner. And I think that her being put into this position as executive producer of EmPowerrr, an all-women's pay-per-view, backed and in association with the oldest and longest-running pro wrestling brand in the world, is finally a validation of her contribution to the wrestling business and the value that she represents to the business as a whole. And I think that she's going to take that with both hands. It ain't going to be easy, but she's had her fair share of things that weren't very easy and made it work. So I have every confidence in her that she's going to do the same thing as the EP of EmPowerrr.
The message of NWA Powerrr at the end of that pay-per-view, I want it to be that women were worth the money and we're worth your time. I want to show that if you buy into us, we'll give you everything you could have dreamed of and more. We're going to perform. Here's what you're thinking. We're going to be up here. And that's all I want from it. I want everyone to enjoy their time and be happy, more than happy, that they bought into it.
You said something, I don't remember what it was, and what I heard was Mickie James, the person who's had to work under bosses for 20 years, thinking about what the office would think, or we can't do that. And I stopped you in mid-conversation. I said, Mickie, this is our show.
Right.
This is our show. You run the show now. Mm-hmm. You don't have to ask for permission. This is
right.
our world. We're building this world together.
Right.
And you actually stopped for a minute and you were like, well, I never thought of that.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's crazy to think about. And it is a different place to sit, because I can understand, like we were talking about, I was like, I can understand, and I'm starting to understand from a bigger perspective, And, I've always been, at first it was for Mickie, and then it was for women, and then it was ultimately for women in the business and the industry, because it was a desire to change perceptions. But now to look at it from the business as a whole, but from this other seat, that I'd always wanted us to sit in, but it opens your eyes to a lot more of the things and the business sides and all these other things. So it's a lot to take in, and it's a lot of pressure. I typically do well under pressure, so
All
I'm
right.
excited
That's
about
good
that.
to know now.
Yeah, you're like, oh, oh gosh, nobody freak out. No, I'm excited. I'm super excited, and it's just, like you said, it's just a whole different set of lenses that I've never worn before.
That's the point I've been trying to make. If you made it to this far, that's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
Until you sit in this seat, you can't totally understand the options, the choices, the pressures.
Right.
But I also know that if I don't empower someone of your credibility to show me the way, if I think I know how to do it, I already know I don't know how to do it.
Right.
I don't have that credibility with the locker room. I don't have that credibility with the public. And anybody who doesn't understand the difference there won't understand what we're trying to do.
Right.
And if they don't, well, then just watch the pay-per-view and we'll demonstrate it for you. August
Yes.
28th, NWA EmPowerrr. August 29th, NWA 73. Twin pay-per-views. Best I know, I think we're offering a kind of a twin package. So if you want
Yeah.
to purchase both through Fight, we're going to be on Fight live around the world from the historic Chase Ballroom.
Can't wait.
If it gets better than that for our situation, let us know. But we're pretty excited.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.